may not want to be fixed at all. They may be perfectly happy with what they're doing now. Can we change and adapt? Yeah, we absolutely can. People can change and people can adapt if we want to. If we're really in an emotionally committed relationship and we have deep love and caring for the other person, why would we honestly do something that hurts them? You don't want to do things that hurt them. Their care and their comfort is sort of like your priority. So why would we want to do things that bother them? So we can then attenuate some of our things. And our partner, with enough communication, enough skills, they can ask us questions and understand why it is important to us that we don't change certain aspects.
Robert, if you look at the data and the stats around marriage, marriage numbers are on a decline. Fewer and fewer people are getting married every single year. Those that are in marriages are leading in divorce. It's above 50%, I think, is the statistic. People are getting married later on in life like never before. Would you describe this as a marriage crisis? And if so, what is, in your opinion, sitting at the root of that?
Oh, such a good question. The stats suck. And there's a huge push for people to do exactly what you talked about. Just like, I don't even know if it's worth the risk. I think probably the thing to do about it is understand that when we talk about the stats on marriage, that encompasses all marriages. So that encompasses first marriages, second marriages, and third marriages, right? So the stats on first marriages are high 30s, but second marriages are 50, 60%. And when you come to your third marriage, it's somewhere in the 70 percentile for divorce rate. So those numbers really are an aggregate of all those things. And there's a lot of stuff. And I'll throw in one that you're going to hear about and that we talk about a lot on our podcast, which is, you would think that not, there's this research on cohabitating versus not cohabitating prior to marriage, right? Abstaining, not living together versus living together and abstaining. And by the way, unfortunately, the data is the same. Those who cohabitate for 5 and 6 years, like let's just say they're 20 and they decide to move in together, they get married at 29, or they're 21, never been married, abstain from sex, and then they get married and then start their intimate relationship. The data is really the same. So it's not like there's one better than the other. There's some psychological differences and some familiar differences, but that's where that stat lies. So I love sort of digging into that stat about like why is it 50% or more. But it's still a little bit lower. It's not as horrible, but it for a lot of people it makes you pause.
And I think you and your wife have been married for 31 plus years. And I'm sure a lot of the work that you're doing, we'll get into your story here in a little bit. But I think one thing I've heard you guys talk about is actually how maybe you define marriage or committed relationship. I think you guys have come at this from maybe a little bit different of an angle. Can you kind of, explain to us your definition of marriage or committed relationship?
Yeah. So, and we talk about that too. So marriage sometimes is a piece of paper, and in a larger sense, we talk about people that are just in an emotionally committed relationship where you're living together, you're sharing resources, whatever those are. It doesn't mean you don't need to share your bank account, right? But you're committed to one another, where you're not in most relationships accepting outside influence, right? You're my ride or die. I'm with you. This is how that works. And which means if I'm committed to you in that relationship, then I need to figure out how to work out my crap and our crap together, right? We have to be able to work through that, because we can't just pull the chute the minute things get tough. That's not an emotionally committed relationship, right? So if we're committed to working through our stuff, working through our baggage that each of us brings into this relationship. We're committed to working through the hard times. And the hard times are hard. Like, it's not a matter of if we're going to hit hard times in any relationship. It's a matter of when. And you need to be emotionally mature enough to be able to understand how to communicate with your partner, how to work through those things, how to accept feedback and how to accept information, and have your partner be able to do the same thing without jumping up and down on your triggers and, trying to spin you out.
Have we been sold a lie? And what I mean here, right, is, you gave some great phraseology there with like the working, being the committed, like knowing that there's going to be hard times. Do a lot of people enter into a marriage thinking that once they sign this piece of paper, once they sign this document, once it's official, that all the problems that maybe were presented in the relationship are going to go away?
Yeah. And I think probably, to that point, one of the things that we see a lot, and we saw this in our own relationship. So, I'm happy to share how that works. But, you overlook all of the sort of the warning signs when you fall in love, because your emotional system sort of takes over and you fall in love and or lust, and everything is new, and you're now living in a Disney fairy tale. Like, all this stuff is happening. and you sort of overlook all these things that might have, with some perspective, you overlook some of these things that might have been maybe warning signs. I hate to use the word red flags because like all over social media now, there's like, this is my red flag and my gold flag or whatever the heck it is now, you know. But yeah, they might have been warning signs, and you sort of wash past those and you overlook them for, for rightly so. You're like, oh, I can deal with that. And also there's this, there's theory sometimes where one of the partners always feels like they can fix the other one. Like, oh yeah, they have these things, but I bet I can fix that. Like, and that creates a challenge because the other partner may not want to be fixed, may not want to be fixed at all. They may be perfectly happy with what they're doing now. Can we change and adapt? Yeah, we absolutely can. People can change and people can adapt if we want to, right? And if we want to, if we're really in an emotionally committed relationship and we have deep love and caring for the other person, why would we honestly do something that hurts them? Like, you don't want to do things to hurt them. You want their care and their comfort is sort of like your priority, or you would seem to make it that. And so why would we want to do things that bother them? So we can then attenuate some of our things, and our partner with enough communication, enough skills, they can ask us questions and understand why it is important to us that we don't change certain aspects. Those are big questions too.
Yeah, no, yeah, we had a great episode with Don Massler Biggie. She's a love biologist. She had a TED talk that went massively viral. The science of how our brain falls in love. 5+ million views. She talked about this kind of 2-year process that, from the neurochemical, like chemistry standpoint of our brains, like we go through these 4 different phases of falling in love. And one thing he said there is like we kind of get caught up in this honeymoon phase. It's like we're kind of lusting at this individual, and literally a part like the rational part of our brain shuts down. Like we're not able to see some of these warning signs. So knowing that, I mean, would you advise somebody to wait 2 years until they're rationally thinking? Or if not, how can we maybe begin to identify, and what does that look like from a conversational communication standpoint?
Such a good question, and this is the part that we bring to our. So we do some work with newlywed couples. So we'll hold a newlywed or almost married courses sometimes, and we do that sort of in our area here. And well, if anybody asks us to do it, we do it online and in person, and really it boils down to asking questions. And these are the questions that we don't think about asking. It's like, well, I don't know, what do you like to do on Thanksgiving or Christmas, right? Do you like to go to your family? Is this a big deal for your family, or is it not a big deal for your family? Maybe if you're, and we have some, actually, we were just working with this Jewish couple, like, and one was very much Orthodox and the other one was not as much. Like, do you want to celebrate Hanukkah? Do you also want to celebrate Christmas? Because maybe one of your parents did or not. And we don't run into these things until the event happens. And then it's Christmas Eve and we're like, oh no, we're supposed to whatever. Or like, so a perfect example, like my mom used to spray white flocking on Christmas trees, like spray it all over the crap. Right. So I had no idea. I thought that's what a Christmas tree was supposed to be because that's the way I was raised. Right. Charlotte, no, all green. Right. So like first Christmas, we buy the tree and I go buy the flock. And she's like, what are you doing with that crap? I'm like, I'm spraying it on the tree. She's like, no, you're not. Okay. Well, there's your first argument over the Christmas tree. But if you can ask questions, and these are questions that you wouldn't think to ask, when we're starting to date somebody and we're trying to decide what does our future look like with them. You're like, well, I like to go bike riding, or I like to go camping, or I like to go hunting, or I like to surf, or whatever that is. Right. And oftentimes we meet these people doing the same activity. So we already know that we're sort of enmeshed with them in that. Right. But then we say like, well, do you want kids? Do you not want kids? Should we go to school? Should we not go to school? Do you want me to work hard? Do you not want me to work? And those are easy. When you're sad, how do you want me to comfort you? Want me to leave you alone? Do you want me to give you space if you're angry, or do you want me to hold your hand? Do you want me to say something? Do you not want me to say something? How would you like me to initiate sex? I'm pausing there because I think sometimes we've never asked that question, right? Like, how would you like to initiate intimacy? Would you want me to talk about it first? Do you want me just to grab your butt? Like, what do you want me to do? Then this is a guy's perspective, right? What do you want me to do? Would you like me to call you and like? There's so many different things, and unless you ask these questions, you're never really going to dig into the hard stuff. How do you want me to deal with your parents? How do you want to be treated when you're sick? Do you want me to baby you, or do you want me to tell you to tough it up? Right? And we never think about these types of questions because it's just the way that our mom did it, or it's the way that we've done it. And so we always take the things, this whole sphere of influence when we were raised, we take that. And I was raised with flocked Christmas trees, and Charlotte was not raised with flocked Christmas trees. And we come together and we have our first argument over a stupid Christmas tree. Probably not our first argument, but our first argument over Christmas, right? And Christmas Eve always looked like one thing for her. Everybody came to her family's house and celebrated. For me, it was always, a little bit more religious or something like that. I don't remember what we used to do because we've been doing her thing for so long, right? But then it comes down to like, what do we want to do to create something that's ours and ours only, so one of us doesn't feel like we're not being heard? And that's sort of a crux, right? So if one person in the relationship is always driving the decision making, always our decision is driven by that, right? um, then the other person doesn't feel heard, and then if you don't feel heard, then resentment comes in, right? And this will start to be more of a problem when you have kids, right? So let's say now you have 1.5 children or two kids, and you're at work, right? Mom's at home managing the children, and she clearly has to make all the decisions for household, right? Essentially what's for dinner is going to be whatever she has time for, unless you're going to bring it home, and maybe you should help. Who has a doctor's appointment? You didn't make the doctor's appointment for the kid because you don't know what the schedule is, right? And then when they get to school, same thing. And so we sort of default into letting, when there's kids, we sort of default in letting the mom or whoever's at home, because I know dads that are stay home too, make all those decisions, and the other person doesn't feel heard. Like, well, I just go to work and do all this work, and I come home, nobody asks me my opinion at all. Like, I'm at work, I'm making decisions all day long, and then I get home and I'm not making any damn decisions around here, right? And when you start to say that, you can see where resentment will start to creep in, and then resentment creates distance. Distance destroys intimacy. And now the only thing your wife is saying is the only time you want sex is when the only time you want to touch is when you want sex. Well, yeah, because I felt this emotional distance, but I still need sex. So, and you're my go-to person. You're the person I have sex with. So now we have this relationship where she starts to resent sex and physical contact, right? So I just painted this really wonderful picture of having a baby, and realized and 66% of couples who have their first child report within the first 3 years marital dissatisfaction. And that's a big number. But the question is, what are the 33% that are reporting not marital dissatisfaction? What are they doing right? And so we like to study what they're doing right. Like, how does that answer things?
Yeah, and that's what I love about your guys' work and how you look at things, because it can be very easy to focus in on the negative. And I think a lot of people, especially in the online space, because that's the polarizing, triggering stuff, right? Is like all the problems, the red flags out there. Like, you're going to get clicks, you're going to get attention, you're going to rile people up, you're going to get people, caught up in the emotional state, absent of any rational thinking. So I think that's where we're really aligned on a lot of these things. Is like, okay, the system isn't broken. Like, there's success. And if you go back, decades, there's a lot more success. So what are they doing? What are the people that are having success here today? Understanding that we have to bridge the gap between the times that we're in today, right? We don't live in the same time as we did in the 40s, but maybe some of those same fundamental principles will work. But if one person is succeeding in a marriage today, then that tells me that everybody can do it if you're willing to put in the work. I love how you kind of painted this, holiday picture there, and kind of in my mind, I'm thinking like every single person listening to this, every guy out there, probably maybe growing up, maybe right now in their family, maybe it's them. You go to a holiday with your family, and there's always that one uncle that's kind of on the side of the couch. Just you can see that he's miserable. He's disconnected from everybody else. He's sitting there, arms folded. He's not engaged in the conversation. He's not engaged in the activity. I think I always maybe looked at that individual as like, he's just not, he's just that quiet, kind of isolated guy. I never thought about, what this guy maybe doesn't, he's never experienced holidays this way. Like, he's used to different type of traditions. So I love that you brought that question, because I'd never heard that talked about before. Is like, hey, how do you celebrate these holidays? And like, are we going to do it your way? Are we going to do it our way? Are we going to maybe kind of bridge the gap here? You do it this, we'll do this holiday with your family. We'll do this one with your family. So I really love the picture that you painted there.
Yeah, I mean, and those are the questions that we don't ask, right? Like, we just don't. We just, because we assume like, oh, Christmas is here. I love opening Christmas presents Christmas Eve. Like, what? Like, no, 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 no. We open Christmas presents Christmas morning when nobody's awake and everybody's asleep and wants to be in bed, right? Like, so those are just small things, but you can spend years doing the small thing wrong, and then, right. And so we'll kill resentment. And I love your perspective. And so I want to bring it back to your original question, right? Your original question was like, is marriage dead? Right. I've had this before in one of our other podcasts too. Like, is marriage, like everybody's putting it off. Nobody wants to do it. Everybody says it's wrong. Like, it's either half empty or half full, right? And Charlotte loves your perspective, right? If somebody can do it right, then anybody can do it right. Like, let's just figure out what the people are doing right. And so, yeah, marriage, 47% of marriages are failing, right? But okay, well, that's 53% of marriages are getting it right. So let's look at half full. Like, let's figure out what the people are doing, right, and can we model that? And that's the beauty of the Gottman research, and that's we're trained in the Gottman methods, um, and they've done 30 years plus research on couples, newlywed couples, married couples, and longitudinal studies on these couples to just decide like what went right and what went wrong, in their relationships. And they found the beauty is they can, and I always tell Charlotte, it's like, I don't want John Gottman. He's still alive. I don't want him watching her and I have a conversation, because in 15 minutes he can tell you whether or not your marriage is going to be happy. Like, and that's pretty dangerous to be able to have that power. But he's a researcher. His wife is a researcher, and they've just dedicated themselves to doing this. And so, to that end, they started, and this is, I don't know, 20 years ago. I had it written down. Is it 30? Ooh, 20. Yeah, it's been the 30 years. It took like 3,000 couples and they initially started with these couples, and they had just newlywed couples come in, and they had them say, look, I want you to have three conversations. One, when you're going to talk about something good in your day. One, I want you to try and resolve this conflict that has been, standing in your relationship, whatever that is. And then third, I want you to talk about, I just want you to talk about something that's pleasant, like where your next vacation is. Right. And you would think about it is, the first thing that they learned was, so they bring these couples back every 3 years. And the first thing that they learned was the conflict conversation, like talk about that one problem that you want to solve for 15 minutes. It's the same damn problem. So every 3 years, same problem, right? Which leads us. So, and I'll talk about the results of that research, but I love this. And it's what they found was 69% of problems in your relationship are not solvable. 69% not solvable. You're not going to solve that. You'll disagree over the same 69% of the problems. You're going to disagree over those your entire relationship. So we need to switch our mindset from we need to solve all of our problems to how do we understand why this is important to my spouse, right? And manage that problem, not solve that problem. We need to manage the problems that are there, because we are two different people. I am a flocked Christmas tree. Charlotte is a green Christmas tree. And we're never like, now I don't even know what I do with a flocked Christmas tree, but we bring our upbringing and our relationships together. We mesh them, right? We mesh our decisions and our biases together, and we're never really going to agree 100%. One of us could acquiesce and build resentment, like you never hear me out, you're always doing things your way, right? Or we can agree to understand what in that problem exists, as we call these tightly held values, like what's the important value there. So perfect example for Charlotte and I in our relationship. We have our last son is at home. We have 4 kids. Our last one's 15. I was raised very authoritarian and strict, right? Do it because I said so. Charlotte was very much raised with, well, you earn respect. So I was raised, respect is given to older people, parents, just because. She was raised with, well, they got to earn your respect. So why do we disagree on how to raise our son? I'll say, hey, I need you to go do this. And he's like, why? I'm like, because I said so. And Charlotte's like, well, you should give him a reason, help him understand, right? And I'm like, okay, this is it, right? And so, we dig down and figure out, like, why is it important to me that he show respect to me, right? Well, it's not really in my mind, right? For me, respect is a deeply held core value. So she digs that out. She's like, okay, why is this important to you? Because if he doesn't respect me, he's not going to respect you. And if he doesn't respect his mother, right? Nobody treats my girl poorly. If he doesn't respect his mother, then there's going to be a problem. And as he respects his mother, then the girls that he dates, he's going to respect. And the mothers of the girls he dates are going to see that, right? So I'm just trying to train that in him. And she goes, that's actually really fair. I think that this is something that we should work with, right? We don't agree 100% on how to make that happen, but she then sees my point of view, right? So understanding that. So did we solve that as one of our 69% problems? Nope, didn't. We're always going to disagree over that. But at least we can understand and generate some compassion as to why we have that disagreement in our relationship.
Okay, okay, yeah. I'm glad you kind of expanded on that there a little bit because when you're like 69% of problems are not solvable, it's like okay, so we're just going to have this problem that's kind of presented in front of us all the time, and it's like I think you had a lot of context into what you actually meant by being solvable. There was a solution that was found, but it was an agreement, you know, where maybe both parties aren't 100% all in, but you know, one was given, one had to take a little bit, and maybe you know, obviously that comes back to the importance of communication, which Rob is going to spend a bit of time on. I want to ask you about arguing. You know, you kind of gave some examples, you know, with, you know, if you don't ask these specific questions, if you don't ask the important questions early on, you know, these can lead to some pretty big arguments, you know, because things weren't really brought up. What is the importance of actually being able to, I don't even know if I want to say it successfully argue, but just kind of being able to push and give and take and almost that kind of, I think Jordan Peterson almost talks about it as a dance a little bit between the two. Like you got to have a little bit of conflict in the relationship because that's going to create that even a deeper intimacy. What are kind of your thoughts around this conversation?
Yeah, so I love that, and you know, if I could have just tossed you a softball so you could hit my next question, that was perfect. So that was good. Um, I like to say how you disagree is how your relationship goes. Right? Do you disagree with knives and clubs, or do you disagree with feather pillows? Like, what is it that you're swinging when you're mad, right? And so when we talk about the predictors of an unhappy relationship, because I framed that out and I want to just sort of pick on that. What they realized is if any one of what when John Gottman calls the four horsemen, if any one of the four horsemen show up, which is criticism, contempt, stonewalling, and defensiveness, right? Um, if any one of those show up in this conflict conversation, um, then we know that we're going to have a rough ride in our relationship. So how we disagree, right? Can we do it without sharp words? Can we disagree without becoming defensive? Like, well, that's not my fault. It's your fault. Like, I just don't understand, right? And there's lots of versions of defensiveness. Guys, women are a little bit better, not always, but women are a little bit better at contempt. I'm so much better than you. I'm talking down to you. I can't believe I have to explain this to you again. You were never here. You're at work anyway, right? That's contempt or criticism, which is, you know, like you never listened to me or like you're so just, I can't with you right now. Right. Or I can't believe you put the tree together poorly like that. Like it's just criticism is just that death by a thousand cuts. Right. Those are just going to wear out. So that's just sharp words, sharp tongue. And if you can tease that out, it's a little bit better. Now, guys are better at stonewalling and defensiveness, right? So defensiveness, well, that's not my fault. I wasn't here. I don't know what you're talking about. And stonewalling is maybe the guy's favorite, which is where we just, she's just going on and on about how I parked the car in the garage poorly or whatever that is. And I'm just like, geez, like I'm just tuned out. Like, geez, is she gonna have a heart attack? Like, I hope she doesn't have a stroke here while she's just getting so pissed, right? So we're checked out. We're not really doing anything. It's not anything. And the reason for guys when we stonewall is it's really because in our life growing up and even in guys' version of things, like men can tend to be a little bit more physical. Not always, and that's a broad strokes paintbrush, right? Um, but we'll solve things with a push or a shove, or we'll knee you in the back of the leg, or slap you on the back or the shoulder, or something like, dude, don't be a dick, right? And and we don't get to make physical contact that way with our wives, right? So for us, we just like, well, okay, I can't, I wish she'd shut up, but I can't do anything about it, so I'm just going to turn it off, and that's stonewalling, right? So right? Criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling, like any one of those. And you have to look for the antidotes in those, right? So, and we work with people all the time on like just how to manage just these pieces. We do a whole section on just criticism and a whole section on contempt, right? And Charlotte self-admittedly says that she was the queen of contempt, right? She'd roll her eyes and just pretend that she was so much better at you. And I could feel that, right? This was earlier on in our relationship. And as I mentioned to you, before we started, like we realized we needed some tools and wish that we had some better tools when we first got married as well. But so for us in our relationship, you know, early repair is the fastest way to get past the four horsemen, right? And so early repair, like, so Charlotte will say something, usually it's me. I'll say something, she'll say, "Ooh, that was a little sharp." Okay, that's my cue that my communication didn't work as well as I intended, that I hurt her feelings, right? And then I'll say, "Oh, okay, hang on, let me back up. I'm a little tired. I just got off a phone call. This is not your fault. I didn't mean to project that on you. Can I start over?" Just say, "Hey, did you feed the dog today?" Instead of, "Does anybody ever feed the damn dog?" Right? One is really sharp, one is not. And so realizing that if we just We try to stay calm. We try to keep the four horsemen, right? Criticism, defensiveness, geez, I lost the other one, contempt, and stonewalling, right? So if we forget and we start using the four horsemen in our disagreements, then it's going to be a rough ride. We're going to have to learn how to repair later, and then we're going to need to take a break from that conversation and come back when our heart rate's not flooded. So one of the things that's interesting about this sort of disagreement in general. So I was raised. My mom's married 4 times. The last one stuck, which was good. And but I saw yelling, screaming, and fighting from as soon as I could remember. Right. So how did Robert learn how to disagree? Robert learned how to disagree by yelling, raising his voice. Right. I raise my voice. I yell. Maybe I throw things like because I don't know. That's what we do. You ever seen a 2-year-old get mad and say "damn it" and throw his toy on the ground? They didn't just come up with that. Yeah, they learned that somewhere, right? So that was me, right? I punch walls, like I don't know, right? And to Charlotte, her parents got divorced when she was 12, and so she had a lot of turmoil in her relationship as well. So we took my way of solving problems, yelling and screaming, her way of solving problems, yelling, criticism, contempt, and we run these two together, right? By the way, there's some interesting research that came out just on couples that were divorced. So if the girl in the relationship, if her parents were divorced, she has a 63% chance of getting divorced in her first relationship. If the guy was from a divorced relationship, he's got a 43% chance of being divorced. Now, let's add these two together. If the husband is from a divorced family and the wife is from a divorced family, their likelihood of getting divorced is somewhere in the 130, 140% chance. So it's really good. And when we talk about it, like we shouldn't have made it. Like we shouldn't have made it. If Charlotte and I got married in today's world where relationships are disposable, we'd have had everybody in our ear saying, it's not worth it. It's not the right fit. You should be happy and you be free, and boom. And we'd been gone. Right. But religious backgrounds and a lot of hard headedness because we didn't want to do what our parents did. So we stuck it out. And it was a rough road for a while until we learned how to find some tools.
Yeah, would you add that into one of the important questions or conversations that need to be had early on? Like, I mean, pre-marriage, right? Even in kind of the dating phase. I know kind of stepping a little bit outside of the marriage here a little bit, but trying to understand, the environment of the marriage and the relationship that you were born and raised up, because it's a parent that has a massive influence on how you're going to show up. So is it important? And then if so, how does a man here listening to this, maybe he's in the dating phase right now, maybe he's early on in his marriage. How do you even bring that conversation to the table without trying to sound like you're judging or you're looking for a red flag?
Well, that was so bad, right? Like this is like, oh yeah, I listened to this podcast the other day. He's like, your parents divorced? Yes. Oh shit, you're at 63%. I can't date you anymore. No, I mean, so I think it's just about getting tools, right? You just have to understand, right, and ask the questions, and that can happen early and that can happen late. Like, I don't think there's any answer for how long you should get to know somebody, but you should get them. You should see them when they're sick. You should see them when they're having a bad day, and you should and take some clues from that, right? Um, and just start to recognize these things, right? Like, what does criticism look like? What does contempt look like? So and you can intervene early. So Charlotte's mom, um, you know, learned from her mom. Like, so I'm not blaming anyone here because we learn things. These are passed down. Charlotte's mom learned criticism and contempt really, really well. Charlotte's mom taught that to her daughters, criticism and contempt really, really well. And I watched that when we were in a relationship, when we were first dating, and her sister would just she would just berate her husband. And I remember early on in our relationship, Charlotte and I were talking, and I think sometimes it's these conversations that you can have. You gotta sometimes be vulnerable. And Charlotte started in on me, and it was probably before the Christmas tree flock, but she started in on me, and we talked about this. So I'm not sharing anything that's private on this, but and I looked at her and I said, "Hey, look, I am not your brother-in-law, and you can't talk to me this way. Like, you can figure out a better way to talk to me, but whatever it is, you're not going to run me down like that. Like, that may work somewhere else, but it doesn't work here." And she took that feedback and said, like, "Oh, okay, yeah, you know what? You're right. Like, maybe I shouldn't talk to her that way." Um, Later on in our relationship, she likes to use this other quote, which I didn't know was important when I did it, but she mentions it quite often. She was actually helping me prepare for. I was giving a presentation to a men's group, and she was helping me prepare for that. And that was, I don't know, 5 or 6 years before we started the podcast. And she was giving me some feedback, but she was a little sharp on her feedback. And I just looked at her and I said, you know what? Like, no one can hurt me the way you hurt me. I don't let anyone else hurt me the way that you can hurt me. And she took that. She said, you know what? That was like a moment for me when I realized the power that I have. And as guys, and this is the conversation I have with the women, and it's something to recognize for guys. Like, as guys, we armor up. Like, we go out and we face the day. Like, if we're in sales, right, if we're trying to close people, we got to hear the word no, right? And if we work for somebody, we got to hear feedback, right? Because we're not always 100% perfect. We're always going to hear some feedback, and we armor up. And the yo mama jokes and everything else that get bantered around back and forth between us as guys would be really painful if those come from somebody that you loved. Like, you love your friends, but you're armored up. Like, we armor up when we leave the house. When we come home, we take our armor off, right? And we take our armor off, and we're vulnerable. And we're vulnerable to insults. We're vulnerable to contact. We're vulnerable to all those things. So for the women, if there's any women listening to this show, here's my speech to you. If your man feels like he's distant, he has his armor on and you can't get through to him. If you say you can't get through to him, there's a reason, because he's got his armor up, right? Ask him to take it off and then respect the fact that he's unguarded. Because if you don't, and you stick a knife in there, he's going to wear his armor all the time. And then he's going to get tired. And you're going to get tired because you're just like, every time I come home, it's just a fight. Like, I just don't want to do it anymore. Right. And that's a sad place to be. And this is where we want to intervene. I want to help guys take their armor off. I want them to realize that as they become more vulnerable and they take a chance to get hurt, that love, intimacy, and connection can deepen. But you have to take your armor off. You got to take a chance on that. And this applies to the dating world too. Like, I was hurt. I had an engagement and she broke it off. And, and I wasn't looking for another girl at all. She wrecked me. Right. I was playing basketball on Tuesday nights with a bunch of guys, and it was one of the other guys. She's like, I want to date him. Handed me my ring back. I'm like, bro, that hurt. Right. And when I met Charlotte, I was not looking, not at all, not even close. She was one of three I was dating at the same time. And I didn't tell any of them about each other. Right. And then she walked in, and I freaking fell head over heels in love with her. And I said to myself, this girl better leave town or I have a problem. So she stuck around, and here we are, 32 years, by the way. We just had our anniversary. So 32 years later. But you have to allow yourself to be hurt in order to connect. Your soul can't connect with somebody behind your armor. It just can't. It's like your cell signal in a basement, right? It ain't getting out.
Yeah, that's beautiful, man. And congratulations. Massive milestone, and hopefully 32 more, glorious years and beyond for the two of you. I want to ask your thoughts and take around the role of a man. Right. So, if you look across the world, maybe just within, I don't want to isolate this just the US, but, I think that a lot of us, I'm not sure you stand on this. I think it's pretty evident, though, that the modern man is struggling. Right. The average man is overweight, obese. He's lacking maybe purpose and passion. Has this been intentional? We can kind of keep that to a different, conversation, but we can say that, men are struggling in today's world. The higher percentage of them, with this, how can a guy, step into, the proper role? So what is the importance of a strong masculine man setting the tone, setting the frame within a successful relationship?
Oh, geez. The stats on having a woman raise kids in single parent households are horrific. I mean, it is the likelihood of drug abuse is, I don't know, 40, 50% higher. The likelihood of going to jail is so much higher. The likelihood of not finishing high school is so much higher in single parent households. Like, the stats are just horrific. So if you're if you're a guy in your relationship, you matter to your children, right? You matter to that. And I will tell you, from my perspective, as someone who's raised in a single parent household, I needed and wanted a dad like you have no other. And I attached myself to some not very nice guys because I was looking for that. Now, what is our role in the relationship? Well, our role is yin and yang and balance and that masculine energy. And I'm just going to tell you right now. So I saw a very interesting podcast just yesterday where the guy was talking about the question was like, what is toxic masculinity, right? And I think that's the thing that's sort of pressing us down right now. This whole like we can't be too masculine because we're pressing down on toxic, because we're going to be called toxic. But the term toxic masculinity was actually developed in prisons. It wasn't developed for the normal population. It was developed to try and figure out why it is these guys would attack each other and stab each other with no notice, right? Like what that was. And they were like, it was this toxic masculinity. And it just sort of got picked up by the mainstream media. And now it gets thrown around into like, what does it mean to be, masculine? And oh, like that's just toxic. I can't have your toxic masculinity around me. And that's driven by, that's driven a little bit by feminism. But in a relationship, we need, you need a little bit of this hard, and a little bit of soft, and you need the balance that exists there. And there's things that only your dad can bring, that only you as a guy can bring to the relationship. Like, I mean, let's be honest, right? Some women are going to try to be super uber independent, and that's great, and love them for that, right? And some are going to want somebody to do everything for them, and other women want a partner, right? I want a partner in my life who could, if she had to, do everything that she needed to do, but respects and loves me for my role and the things that I want to do, right? And strengthens me in my role and helps me there where I strengthen and help her in her role. So what do we need to do? There's you do feel this role as the guy to some extent to want to be at least somewhat of a protector for your family, or feel some pride in the fact that you're going to stand in front of whatever that is. Like if a stranger knocks on the door, like you're going to be the one going to the door, right? You're going to let your kids go to the door if it's 9 o'clock at night and the door knocks, like, no, I'm getting the door, right? I'm not saying that I'm better at that than anybody else, but I want to do that for my family. Now, is that toxic? I don't think so, right? But do I want to show I just think there's not enough respect for people in general. And as we talked a little bit before, like I want my boys to respect women. I want my boys to respect people in general. I want them to grow up and contribute to society. I don't want them dragging it down, and I don't want them doing, knuckleheaded things. Now, we all do knuckleheaded things, like on a regular basis. I do too. But, do we need to be strong enough? Yes, I think we do. And, a couple of years ago, I sort of went through this stage where I had to make a decision on my health. When your wife comes to you and asks you, what are all the passwords to the utility accounts online? Like that's a hint that she didn't think I was going to be around much longer. Right. So I had to get after it. Like I had to make a decision because things just slowly creeped up on me. Right. I gained some weight and didn't put my health as a priority. So now my health is a priority because I need to be healthy enough to, beat my 15-year-old at pickleball or whatever else it is. Although he's 6'2", he's taller than me. I can't beat him in any tall sports anymore. He just reaches over the top of me and he loves to. But, you need to be healthy enough to enjoy life, right? And to be a good partner. And so some of that has to do with being strong and taking advantage of the testosterone that you have and that you can build in your body. There's a lot of great things. Cold plunge is great at developing. It'll increase your serum testosterone. It actually does it in women as well, but cold plunge is a great thing, and it gets you uncomfortable. Like, but you can do it, and if you can do that, you can do a lot of other things. So just start with something that makes you uncomfortable, and then start building that. Like I've always been a cyclist. Like I love to ride, and riding's about suffering. You got to go up a hill, and like that's gonna suck, and we're gonna do that. Or and my business partner, he loves to work out, right? So I'll work out with him, and I love working out with my wife. The answer is like, can you find that one thing where your wife respects you? I'm not saying she doesn't respect you, but can you find the thing where she respects you and she respects that you do? And then can you reciprocate that? Can you become a good partner? Because later on in life, one of you is going to have something happen, and it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, right? Like, I had knee surgery and she needed to baby me for a couple of days while I was on crutches, right? Like that's just one small example, right? Where she needed that, but we need to be strong enough, and we need to fulfill our role as husbands and dads and fathers so that our kids can see that. Because my kids, I want them to be a better father than me, right? And I would tell my kids, I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I didn't have a good father role at all. Like, I don't know. I'm sorry. I completely screwed that up. And I'm hoping that I'm getting better at this, as I move through at connecting, at staying there, being there for you and understanding and telling you to toughen up, and all that, whatever that is that the dads do, and teaching about sports and fishing and how to tie a knot and I don't know, how to mow the grass. Like there's tons of things, right? But if not, like, I don't know. I don't want to see the world without dads. I don't want to see relationships without two people in it. I want to see father figures for everybody, but that is certainly my personal opinion when it comes to that. There is some research that shows that it's not a good idea, but I'll go with Robert on that one.
Yeah, we had a beautiful picture painted by a recent guest, Bodie Aldridge. We were kind of having a conversation around the dynamics between the masculine and feminine, and he talks about the feminine as kind of the river flowing, right, and then the masculine is the river bank. Without a bank, a river is just going to be chaotic. There's going to be water spilling everywhere. But you pair the two together, you can get a beautiful scenery, stuff that plays in the world of nature. Moves water from one place to another. It plays this massive role out there in nature, and I think that's kind of what you're speaking to. Is like maybe it's not always going to be the most masculine, like you maybe not be that, super A charging type, but you're probably not going to find the most nurturing soft woman. You're gonna have to meet somewhere kind of in the middle. So it's understanding that these two do have to interconnect and do have to kind of interplay together. I really love kind of how you kind of phrase all that together. And I love that you brought in the health piece. I have a massive background. I spent, for me, 40 years old, I've been training for 25 years. So more than half of my time spent on this earth, I've been intense, very intentional about my training. I was a bodybuilder, see trophies over the right shoulder here. For me back then, it was very aesthetic based. Now it's more longevity focused, right? I use a lot of the things that I do. I took an ice plunge, an hour before we jumped on this call. I did one this morning, and I always do one, about an hour before the podcast, because it just lights me up and just kind of, brings me to kind of the next level. I hate it every single time, right? But I love the feeling when I get out of there. But I think, we're learning so much more, and it's great to see people now that are using exercise and diet and nutrition, not 100% for the aesthetic purposes, but for a preventative, right? We're looking to extend the longevity of our life. In terms of like some of these tools that you've been talking about with the relationship, how much of this early on should be a focus from a preventative standpoint, right? Right out of the gate, like, are we having coaching? Are we getting the help that's needed? Even if the relationship feels like it's riding high and everything is going amazing, should we be looking at developing these tools so that when the shit does hit the fan, we're prepared to take it on?
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to say I love that. I love your example of the river. I'm probably going to use that. So that's a
Yeah, well,
great
credit to
analogy.
Bodie Aldridge because it
Yeah,
wasn't mine, but yeah,
yeah,
feel free
that's
to run with
beautiful.
it.
Yeah, you know what? We think that everybody, and there's so many resources. Like you don't need to go pay for counseling. Like if you're involved in any type of religious organization, even not like if you're going to have a pastor marry you, like oftentimes they recommend premarital counseling, and you're just like, we don't need counseling. We get along great. The funny thing is, they're not going to ask you what's going right. They're going to ask you these questions. They're going to say, look, I want you to go home and journal, and I want you to get to know each other and then come back, because they've seen it down the road, right? They have this experience, right? There's podcasts you can listen to, just, crap. There's our podcast as well that you can listen to. There's courses you can take on, honesty, on vulnerability, on values. And we actually do a values course, which is tremendous, because that is an annual thing for us to dig in and understand. Like, so I'll just preface values because I mentioned it. But values are the things that unconsciously drive our system. Like, what is important to me on an unconscious level, right? So for you, when you were early bodybuilding, it was aesthetics, right? And so that was a core value for you, right? That's the thing that got you up at 5 a.m. And that's the thing that made you have egg whites only when you wanted peanut butter, right? When you were cutting, you were like, nope, because this is an important thing to me, like a deep down core value. And it's one of those things that people say, why do you do it? It's like, I can't even explain it, right? Because it's one of your core values. And so we do a thing every year, which is called our values assessment, right? In our relationship, what is important to me? What is important to Charlotte? And then we align our values. So we believe that the unconscious values assessment is super important for helping people come together. And just when you're aligned in your values, dude, you are two horses pulling in the same direction. If you're not, then you got one horse that's trying to make a left-hand turn the whole time, and you're fighting this fight, right? So any type of premarital counseling, understanding your spouse, getting to know like these great questions that you can ask early on, like how do you how do you want to initiate sex when we get married? And even after you get married, it's a great question to ask. So like I had an eye-opening conversation with Charlotte at year 30 after we'd been doing values for a while. And I asked her, and I won't share too much about that, but we'll say like the values conversation is a prompt, and we'll say, so, what is important to you in the context of your relationship, right? And what is important to you in the context of your marriage. And so each of these is a different values assessment. My business partner and I, and I have a physical therapy business. So, right. I trust me, I get longevity because I see people longevity every day. So my business partner and I do this every year too. what's important in what is important to us in the context of our business together. What are our values for business together, right? So, but in a relationship standpoint, I asked Charlotte, what's important to you in the context of sex, and she's like, she told me, right, and I was surprised at some of the answers that I received. I was like, oh wow, I didn't even know that. Like, I mean, let's be honest. I've been having sex with this woman for 30 years at this point, and I still didn't realize probably some of the important things to her, right? But we don't ask those questions. We don't. We don't ask those questions. And by the way, the bedroom is a huge component of a satisfied relationship. And when you get that right, but you have to get everything right on your way there. You got to get vulnerability right. You got to get intimacy right. You have to get safety right. Right. So there's all of these pieces. But so we like the values conversation when it comes to that. But there are a lot of other great tools that you can get in. Lord knows I wish we had these tools earlier. It would have saved us a little bit of, or a lot of heartache. I don't know. Would have saved us a lot of stuff. It was rough there for a while in the middle. And we went from, the three phases we always talk about it, which is you're never going to make it, to complacency, which is when just working and having kids, right? Where you're just hanging in and hanging in. I'm doing, and I'm doing the dad thing, right? I had two boys in baseball. So I'm getting home from work, throw the kids in the truck, and let's off to a baseball game until 10 o'clock at night, come home, shower, go to sleep, wake up, go to work, come back, do it again. Right. And nobody can fault me saying I'm a bad dad because I'm spending all my time with my boys. Right. But I wasn't spending enough time with my wife. I was putting the kids in front of her. She was putting the kids in front of me. Our idea is date night. So somebody told us like, oh, you guys should do date nights. We're like, great. So we did date night once a month. And then the other 3 days of the month, we did date night with our daughter and our other son individually. That's not date night with your kids. It's date night for you. You get to be with your kids all the time. Right. And so we'll hide behind our kids sometimes. And if you feel like you're doing that, that's fine. And try to reconnect with the most important person, because here's the problem. At year 18, when they're gone, you're left with what you're left with. Right. And now we're in the phase of our relationship where it's how can we build deeper intimacy, deeper love, and increase our play together? Like, what can we do to have fun? What can we do to enjoy each other, enjoy each other's company? And I love my 15-year-old, but part of that is building rituals that work on your intimacy and connection. Our first ritual is when I come home during the day, I'll high five him if he's in the way, but I'm going straight to my wife to kiss her every day, every time when I come home. That's first thing. First thing when I leave, ask her how her day is going, what she has planned, kiss her and leave. Right. Non-negotiable, but just those two touches, 35 seconds each. In 60 seconds during the day, I've recommitted to her and I've connected with her on an emotional level. And she knows that I'm there for her, right? She knows she's important. I have an idea what's going on in her day. She has an idea what's going on in my day. And we're doing it. And they're simple rituals. It's simple. This is not hard. This is not complex. There's other things that are a little bit more complex, but those are easy.
I love that. Yeah, I think Jordan Peterson talks a lot about, the importance of the small daily things that you do. Like that's what creates, 85% of your life. It's not the once a week date night. It's how are we interacting as you said, as I'm leaving the house, as I'm entering the house, because you're going to do that 7 days a week, sometimes multiple times a day. You talked about play there. Talk to me about the importance of play in a successful relationship. You mentioned you guys are living there out just south of Salt Lake City, out there in Utah. Beautiful scenery, outdoor play. You guys try to spend a lot of time during the summer out there in the outdoors. What role does I have a great friend, Tony DiLorenzo, talks about the 6 pillars of intimacy. He talks about recreational intimacy. So for you, in terms of play, how important is play in a successful relationship in marriage?
Yeah, and we'll pull it right from Tony's book, right? And the 6 pillar really is play when it comes to intimacy, because as you have to go back to when you first connected, right? And it usually was around fun. Like you didn't connect over, I mean, maybe you did, but you probably didn't connect in a hospital bed somewhere, right? Where everybody was sick and sad, right? You connected over like you were having fun. You were at an event, you were at a dance, you were at a party, you're at a friend's house, Super Bowl game, like whatever it was. And then your first date was like, hey, let's go somewhere fun. You never said, let's go somewhere sad. Let's go to a nursing home and serve, like, hey, more power to you, but that's not the funnest date on the planet, right? And so we talk about fun. It gets us out of our daily stressors. It creates different conversations. So people oftentimes will ask us, we'll get groups together and we'll go driving side by sides, little 4-wheelers out, for a weekend. And they'll say like, what's important to you? And I say, the conversations change, right? The conversations change because now you can now, the stress that's behind this underlying stress that you have is sort of behind you. You've let it bleed off a little bit with some play that usually creates a little bit of elevated heart rate, right? You're lowering your blood pressure. And by the way, play and genuine fun is an amazing antidote for blood pressure, resting cardiac, resting heart rate, right? Overall vagal tone. And it also it suppresses some of the autonomic nervous system responses to stress, right? So it pushes all of these things down and it allows you to be in a better state. And when you're in a better state, you can have better conversations. And when you have better conversations, you can connect and then you can ask questions, right? And you learn more about your partner. Be a student of your partner. Be a student. Always be a student. I want to learn more about her every day because if you think the minute they always say the difference, and this is in some of the Maxwell, I'm also a Maxwell leadership coach, but in some of the Maxwell stuff they talk about, they say that the difference between a good leader and a great leader is a great leader realizes he has more to learn. Right. And the difference, so I'll just postulate this will be, this will be our quote for tomorrow or something, right? The difference between a good partner and a bad partner is a good partner realizes there's still more to learn. Like, what can I learn about today? What has changed? Which is why, like every year, Charlotte and I do our values assessment. Like I'm just punch that again, but that's why because your values change. What's important to me last year is not important to me this year, or less so, down farther on the list, right? Of the 20 or 30 things that are on my top 10 values, right? And so becoming a student of that person, like what makes them tick, right? And tick. And then can you listen more than you talk? Because I love that. It's my favorite game, right? And trust me, I don't have a problem talking, but I love just listening to people. And I love listening to people so long that it makes them nervous when they start saying things like, dude, like, oh, I've been talking this whole time. I haven't asked you a single question. I'm like, that's okay. I like learning about you, right? Because that when you become intertwined with someone else's life, right, then they feel like you care about them and you do. Or you can decide you don't care about them after what you've heard, which is okay too. Right? Like that's the beauty, right? Not everybody has to like me. And we don't have to like everybody. We don't need to feel bad about that. We just don't mesh with everybody. There's no harm, no foul on that. Like, I don't know. Maybe somebody's a Bulls fan or somebody's a Yankees fan or like a Celtics fan. Like, I don't know. Right. And you can get tied up in that, or you can realize that people are different and what drives us is different. Our wants and needs are different. And just asking questions and repairing, like admitting you screwed up. Like, here's the hardest thing for guys to do is to be vulnerable, right? Do you want to be seen as vulnerable? Do you want people to see you as vulnerable?
Me personally,
Yeah, you personally.
I mean, I guess I would probably have to ask how you're defining being vulnerable, but I'm not sure I'm not afraid of it. Not at all. I mean, I've shared my darkest, deepest secrets and struggles and insecurities and addictions with the world. So I have no qualms with people seeing me as a vulnerable person. Because what I also know is that they're gonna see me and respect me as a very strong, masculine A type of man. And I think it's that balance and that interconnectedness between the two that I look for in men, that I want to surround myself with, and that's how I try to show up in the world as well.
No, I love that. I love that. And that's the question, right? Notice I didn't say, did you want to be seen as weak? Because ain't nobody want to be seen as weak, right? But for some reason in our world, in the guy's world, we've equated vulnerability with weakness. Yeah, and it's not. Vulnerability is strength, right? If I have the strength to show myself, to discuss my inner weaknesses, right, with my best friend, right, my ride or die. If I have the strength to be able to do that, then I can create an intimacy and a bond like no other, right? Quickest way for you to develop connection with other people is share some of your failings, right? And people that take advantage of that they're vultures. They can come and go, and you'll let them go. But vulnerability is strength, and I really want to put that out there. Now, in the term of like being masculine, sometimes we don't feel that's the case, but it's not weakness. Vulnerability is strength, and being vulnerable with your partner, letting them see inside, allows them to accept you and allows them to show compassion. And as we receive compassion, we give compassion, and then the disagreements are not as fired up as they used to be, right? Because then we can understand each other. We understand why this is an important topic for your spouse or your partner. Like, why is this so important? Tell me about it. And be curious again, right? Be a student of that answer and suspend your own bullshit for a minute.
Yeah, I don't know why I hesitated to ask to answer that question, Robert. Because here's what I know, man. Is I spent the first part of my adult life trying to project an image of somebody that didn't have any weaknesses. You know, I mentioned the bodybuilding. The bodybuilding was rooted out of some deep childhood insecurities. Slightly overweight, got picked on here a little bit. I can remember having to buy husky jeans in the JC Penney's department store back in the day, and I kind of had this label of like an overweight fat kid, and I held that identity for a very long time. So when I found bodybuilding, when I found training, it was like, this is a way that can change me. But I literally built a shield. I mean, I recall thinking about it this way. Like, if I'm so big and strong and I carry so much muscle around, nobody will ever know the inner weakness and the inner securities that are going on inside. And it wasn't until I stripped all that away, like a part of my kind of, transformational journey that I've been on was having to literally lose 50 pounds of muscle. I left the gym back in 2019. I walked away from it for 8+ months. And I became shell of the old self, but it was in those moments that I found who I truly was. And out of that birth, obviously the podcasting movement here led me to developing Rebuild Recovery, which has had a massive impact all across the world. So I don't know why I struggled to answer that question, because it should have been an immediate yes. I want people to know that I am vulnerable and strong and masculine all at the same time. Because in my opinion, that's a real man. So I appreciate you asking that.
No, you did great, and it's because we think about that from our masculine point of view. We think about the connotations, like what does it mean to be vulnerable? Does it mean to be weak? So I love that you took off your armor, but right, some people's armor is quite visible, and some people's armor is not visible, and you laid your armor down, and it allowed people to see you, and I think that's the success that you're having is people get to see you, not just not just the outside of you, but people get to see you and what you're passionate about, and that's what drives change. Drives and I love that. And congratulations, by the way, because there's not a lot of people that can do that.
No, I appreciate that. And yeah, I've been able to put a good portion of it back on, and I live in a absolute state of peace right now because I know who I am. I know the gifts that God gave me, and I feel like I'm operating, from a place where I'm utilizing them. So, talk to us about your coaching, your podcast, what you guys are doing out there, how people can connect with you, and we'll kind of drive this conversation on. But this has been absolutely incredible, Robert. I wish we had 4 more hours to go, but yes, kind of drive it home here and tell us a little bit about the Master Your Marriage podcast and coaching, and where the guys can find you if they're interested in going a little bit deeper.
Yeah. So way back to the beginning, like we started this podcast around about a year and something ago. It takes a while to get it rolling, but you know, our goal really was, can we put tools in the hands of people who are struggling in their relationships? And we get emails and calls like every day, like, she wants to leave me. I don't know what to do. And those are heartbreaking for us. We want you to, reach out if you need help sooner than that. But there's a whole litany of episodes there that you can go, and it's masteryourmarriagepodcast.com. The website is the same. All the social is just Master Your Marriage. So that's on Instagram, Facebook, and I think there's some TikTok as well. I think they might flow over. We do 2-on-2, one-on-one coaching. We have retreats. We have online courses that are, easy to access. We want to just try and put tools in the hands of people. There's lots of little downloads that you can get as well. So like, if one of the episodes resonates with you, sometimes there's a download that goes with that, a worksheet or a cheat sheet. And then, we're also running I think we have a values thing coming up at the end of, it might be after this or before this actually airs, but you can always go to the website and find that. And that's where we're going to walk people through our annual. So we're actually doing our annual retreat. We're going to do our values assessment live, show everybody exactly how we do it, what we do, what the step-by-step process is. You get a little workbook that goes with that so that you and your partner can do that, can do the same thing and dig in to find out what your values are and see if you can utilize those two things to put you on the same page. So we got retreats and coaching and coursework and always the podcast. Listen to that. That's the easiest, best option. They're like 15 to 30 minutes long. We try to make it hard, fast, and digestible as best we can.
Beautiful. Yeah, guys, we'll link all that down there in the show notes, masteryourmarriagepodcast.com. We'll have all the links for their socials here as well. A couple final questions here, Robert. I hope you don't mind me asking maybe a personal question, but you mentioned, we're in this constant learning journey, right? We always have something that we're trying to grow in an area that, whether it's an area in our life or learning something about our partner. I think you said it right. The difference between a good partner and a bad partner is the good partner knows that there's always more to learn. What's one thing for you right now in 2024 that you're kind of honed in on and focusing in either developing or learning that's going to improve your relationship in your marriage. It's Charlotte, right? That's your wife's name, Charlotte?
I think this year I want to learn more about how she views. I want to learn more about how she views emotions. So early on, she really held her emotions back. She hid them behind criticism and contempt. And I didn't see a lot of that. And she's never been a really emotional person. I've seen Charlotte cry 5 times, 4 times, 5 times. Yeah, she doesn't. And so she's very stoic. And so she's learning more about that. But I want to this year, and I'm glad you asked the question because I hadn't really dug into it that much, but it did come out in our values conversation. I want to learn more about what her feelings are about feelings. Like, does she see them as weak or does she see them as necessary? She still has them. Like, and I want to dig into her closely held value. Like, why is this important to her? Right. And I haven't dug into that yet, but I think this will be the year to do that.
God, that's fantastic. And guys out there, if you were looking for something to learn about your wife or your woman in your life, learn about her emotions. That is beautiful, man. Last question here, Robert. We love to end every conversation here with the same and final question. I know you're a man of faith. We mentioned that you guys are a part of the church up there in Utah. For me, we call this show the Superhuman Life, right? And it's been, for me, a 5-year journey of trying to uncover, unpack by, speaking with experts and gentlemen and women just like yourself from all across the world and kind of piecing all these different things. And, I feel like I've come up with a really good meaning. I don't want to call it a definition because it's a meaning to me, right? So for me, living a Superhuman Life, it's a way that I try to show up in the world and kind of how I try to operate on a day-to-day basis. As a man of faith, I do believe that we're put here for a purpose. And I think most believers will tell you that, God created me, right? So there's a purpose to my life. But I think a lot of people stop there. It's right. God created me and then my life, like he's just predetermined. It's just predestined of what I need to do. I think living a superhuman life, the way that I see it, right, is understanding that you're here for a purpose, unique gifts that you've been given. The superhuman component comes in the development of those gifts and skills, and then how you bring that into service for the rest of the world to make this world a better place for everybody else. So that's my meaning behind it. But as we end today's conversation, which has been a beautiful back and forth, and so grateful that we got connected. So Robert Snow, mastermarriagepodcast.com. How would you define living a superhuman life?
Oh, I think very the same way. I think God has given us gifts and we can choose to squander them or we can choose to use them. And there's a nice part, in the Bible about the parable of talents, right? Did you magnify your talents? And I think that for me and for Charla, if there's a gift, if there's a way to live our life, it's how can we impact relationships and keep them strong? Because the more single parents there are out there, the more crime, the more people in jail, the more people facing all these issues. And by the way, we're raising the next generation right now. So can we affect this next generation? Can we save one marriage? Like and this might be, I don't know where this is, but that's okay. Charlotte and I say a prayer before we do each podcast, right? And we're praying that at least we can help one couple because that's what we want. Right? Can we help someone in their relationship so they can stay together, stay strong, and find peace? And that's what we want. That's our goal. I want everybody to have a loving relationship that they want to come home to.
I love that, man. That was me back in the beginning. The whole beginning of this journey was if I can inspire one person, whether they were struggling with porn or they had, an issue in their life that they felt that they were powerless over, could I equip them? Could I empower them to maybe take some of those active steps? And I have a very similar prayer. God, use me here in this hour to be a vessel for you and for your good and for your love. So we're so aligned here on a lot of things. And I think that's why we're able to really put this amazing conversation that I know the audience and the men are going to get so much out of. So guys, connect with Robert, connect with him on the social, check out the podcast. If you need these tools, which we all do, punchy, short, actionable, 15 to 30 minute episodes, like you said, with him and his wife kind of co-hosting, and there's just back and forth dance between the two of them. And if you're interested in exploring the work that they're doing, we have all the links down there for you guys to connect with them and explore some of their retreats. Check out the values assessment there as well. But guys, if you got value out of this conversation, I want to thank you for sticking around with us all the way till the end here. We've seen some tremendous growth here over these last couple of months, and it's all due to you guys out there. So if you want to continue to level up so we can bring amazing guests like Robert on and all the incredible guests we've had here, support the show. It truly means the world to me, and the algorithm feeds off of those ratings and reviews. So if you could take a moment here and leave us a 5-star rating and written review, it'd mean the absolute world to us. More importantly, though, if there's somebody in your life, male, female, brother, sister, colleague, it doesn't matter who it is. If you know that maybe they're struggling in their marriage, in their relationships, or perhaps they're not even struggling, but they need this conversation, do us the favor and then the blessing by sharing this episode with them. But for Robert Snow, your host, Coach Frank Rich here, we love you guys. We'll see you next week.